In the hospital with prostate problems. Part 1. If you are a man, this may be the most useful video that you will ever see. It is non-technical, and to make it quite interesting, I will be running miniature steam engines in the background, while I tell my own story about necessary medical checks, looking for prostate cancer, which kills a lot of men every year. I would like to mention at this stage that I am not a doctor or a trained medical professional. When I was a young man, I did want to be a surgeon, and I started going to college to study the subjects necessary to get me into university, but unfortunately I joined a rock and roll band, and that was the end of that. I've always had an interest in how we work and how the planet works, but really when I think back, the reason I wanted to be a surgeon was so I could cut people up while they were asleep. I think it's time to start the engine. This is a Stuart Victoria. And this is how you spell the word prostate. So many people I speak to mispronounce this. How do they pronounce it? They pronounce it prostrate. Here's the word, prostrate. It's an adjective, and it means lying stretched out on the ground with one's face downwards. It drives me mad, the number of people who mispronounce this. I know a medical professional who calls it a prostrate. Thankfully, I've never heard it referred to as an apostate, which is, of course, an entirely different thing. On with the show. I'll just kick the tripod as I move out of the way. I'm running this Stuart Victoria because I'm testing my compressor, and I want to know how long it will run for on a full tank of air. What is a prostate, or to give it its full title, a prostate gland? The clue is in the name. It is a gland, and it manufactures seminal fluid or semen. It's also a muscle, and it's wrapped around your urethra. That's the pipe that goes from the bladder through the prostate to the penis. A prostate gland is a very multifunctional device. It's the part of the body that stops you from urinating for various reasons, one being when someone's just seen you having a pee against a lamppost and you get very embarrassed and shut yourself off mid-flow. That's the prostate doing that. More interestingly, during ejaculation, it's the prostate that pushes the semen, complete with the sperm, up the pipe of the penis out to its intended destination. I always try and explain things simply and in a non-complicated manner, so if you're not happy with this description, please type prostate into Google and don't forget to spell it correctly. I need to relate a few stories in this video, and the first one is something that was told to me by a friend of mine way back in the 70s when he was at university studying to be a biochemist. One evening, myself and a couple of friends and this biochemist guy were having a general chat about bodily functions, like you do. And I don't know how we got onto talking about the prostate gland, but he said it's very important to ejaculate. And I remember saying, "What, now?" And he said, No, I'm being serious." And he went on to tell us that it was of the utmost importance to get rid of the semen regularly. And if you think about it, the whole point of having a prostate gland and a penis, etc., is so we can reproduce. He then went on to say that's the reason that most people who get prostate cancer are not young men, because as they get further on in life, the sex drive diminishes for various reasons, and the semen is held in the prostate for a longer time. Please remember though, I am a musician who makes steam engines, not a doctor. And what I've told you was just a theory of this friend of mine who was studying to be a biochemist, so I don't know whether it's right or wrong. I thought I'd mention it. Now you know the approximate method of operation of the prostate gland, I'll continue the story. I have a prostate gland because I am a male, and my prostate gland works perfectly well. The pressure of the urine is the same as it's always been, and I don't dribble. So how do I get from this perfectly normal scenario, from having blood tests and an MRI scan, to a prostate biopsy? Because I have type 2 diabetes, about once a year I have a thorough blood test. And apart from my hemoglobin sugar level being out of order, everything seems to be fine. As I mentioned at the beginning, when I was younger, I was very interested in the medical profession, and I still am. So whenever I get a blood test result, I have a look at the details. And on most of the blood tests that I've had, everything's been normal. Apart from the word abnormal against my HbA1c test. And even though it's wrong, it always makes me smile. It reminds me of the scene in the absolutely brilliant film Young Frankenstein. And the part where Gene Wilder, who plays Dr. Frankenstein, is questioning Igor, played by the one and only Marty Feldman, as to what the label was on the jar that the brain came out of. And Marty Feldman uttered the immortal words, it said, abnormal. Young Frankenstein is possibly one of my favourite films of all time, and even though I've watched the film lots of times, I still laugh at that same scene. As well as a lot of the other parts of the film, it really is good. I had one of these thorough blood tests in February 2022, and I got more abnormals on this. One of the other categories of the blood test is the PSA level, that is, prostate-specific antigen. And this can indicate a problem with the prostate gland. Mine was 5.17, and the doctor recommended that 30 days later, in early March, I had a second blood test. And this time the PSA level had increased to 6.42. And this is not good. It's not exactly diabolical, but it's not good. It shouldn't be that high. I look back to a blood test I had last year and the level was 4. It's probably important at this stage to mention that I am almost 70 years old. After seeing this result, my doctor made an appointment for me to go and visit him so I could have a prostate examination. I suppose it's fairly important to know at this stage where the prostate gland lives in the human body. It's in front of the rectum. The doctor put on a rubber glove and got some lubricant out. I laid on my side on a bench and he gave me a prostate examination, and he said, "It feels good." At this point I found this quite amusing, and I really had to fight to not say, "Did the earth move for you, doctor?" Instead, I made a genuine comment about his procedure, which was, "You have a touch like a midwife," which he seemed to find very funny. Maybe he hadn't heard that one before. At my age, there was no embarrassment whatsoever at this operation. The man was a professional and must have done this a lot of times. I was quite pleased with this result. It was encouraging. I was still puzzled by the elevated PSA level, though. Shortly afterwards, I was sent to York Hospital for an MRI scan. And just in case you don't know what an MRI scan is, MRI stands for Magnetic Resonance Imaging. It's quite a large machine and fairly intimidating when you first see it. You're laid on a table which then carries you into the inside of the machine, and then it makes a lot of noise and it takes internal photographs of your body using a magnetic field. And this machine builds up a proper image of what's inside your body. Very clever indeed. A couple of weeks later, I received a letter asking me to attend a urology clinic at another local hospital. I don't like hospitals. The only time I've ever been in hospital was 1974 with a broken leg. But it's better to be safe than sorry, so I went along with it and the appointment was made, and I went to see the urologist, who repeated the procedure with the finger up the rectum. And by rectum, I do of course mean my rectum, not theirs. Immediately after the procedure, I wanted to say to the urologist, "Shouldn't we have had dinner first?" But I really thought, as the urologist was female, that might not go down too well, so I kept my mouth shut. This prostate examination was much more thorough than the one done by my local GP. She was trying to get around the front of the prostate because you can feel what's going on. It doesn't hurt, it's just a bit bizarre. I was told that the problem with my prostate appeared to be around the front, and there was a bit of a P-shaped lump on the front which needed looking at. That showed up in the MRI scan, and she was just confirming what the scan showed. What followed next was a bit scary, to be quite honest. The urologist wanted to book me in for a prostate biopsy the following week, but unfortunately I had a band in the studio on the only day they could do. And to be honest, she looked a bit puzzled when I said, I can't do that day, I've got a band in the studio. But the problem is, of course, that I couldn't just cancel the band without at least consulting my diary, which was back at home. The urologist proceeded to tell me that this was quite important and needed to be done. I tried my best to explain why I couldn't just cancel the band and said that I needed to have a look at my diary and I'd ring back and make an appointment. So when I got back home, I looked at my diary, which is on my computer, and then I rang back and booked the day after for the biopsy. So no problem there, just a day out, not bad at all. With just one minor technical difficulty. My family live across the road, and they are my support network, and the day before the appointment, they went down with COVID-19 for the second time. I live alone, and in my imagination, I saw myself laid in bed without a support network, bleeding profusely from various orifices owing to the biopsy. So I took matters into my own hands. Obviously, I cancelled the appointment because they didn't want me to come in because they thought I may have COVID-19. And the new appointment was made for the 19th of April 2022. So this gave me a lot longer to fret about the biopsy. I bought 2 really good quality, absorbent yet waterproof bed protectors that go across the bed and tuck in at each side, so that when I woke up in the morning in a pool of blood, it wouldn't ruin my mattress. And the more I read the details about the biopsy in the leaflet given to me by the hospital, the more scary it got. Now, I must mention that I am not frightened easily. But this was a strange kind of fear. It was like dread. I read in the leaflet that I will be given 2 pads to absorb any blood emitted from my orifices. And I thought, only 2? That's terrible. So I went on Amazon and I bought a pack of 40 and about 10 packs of flushable wet wipes. And after a while, I really felt that I was prepared for the biopsy. I had my own personal biopsy survival kit. Why am I making this video, and why am I talking at length about something that's not very pleasant? Well, the reason is, a lot of men won't go through with this. They won't even go as far as the prostate exam with the finger. And when I get to the end of this video, if you watch it to the end, you'll be a lot wiser, far less likely to die from ignorance. Finally, the time for the dreaded biopsy was upon me. There was no music at the time, I just put that in for effect. In the letter it said, do not drive to the hospital because after the procedure you may not be able to drive back. My first wife, whose name is Fran, kindly gave me a lift to the hospital. I arrived at reception and I was asked lots of questions. I gave one of the nurses a urine sample I'd taken that morning for analysis just to make sure I didn't have any infections. Then I signed all the paperwork. I was given a booklet called After Your Biopsy. At this stage I really did not want to read that. The next thing that happened was the nurse took my blood pressure and I asked her what it was. 160/78 with a resting heart rate of 108. And that really was not encouraging. I take my blood pressure quite regularly because I'm not very good in hospitals. It doesn't give a true reading. When I take my blood pressure and heart rate at home, the results are around 125/75. And my average resting heart rate is between 54 and 61. So there is a considerable difference. The highest blood pressure I've ever had is when I was in a doctor's waiting room and there was a machine and you put your arm in the machine, which suddenly grabbed my arm and took my blood pressure. But it was actually taking the blood pressure of my elbow. And when I took the ticket that the machine printed into the doctor looked at me and said, "How can you be alive?" I love machines, generally speaking, but only machines that I can control. For instance, I was concerned about the MRI scan, and often, if I'm uneasy with machines, they do break down, and I've done this a lot of times, so when the MRI scanner refused to function, I wasn't surprised. They had to get me out of the machine, thoroughly reboot the system and try again, and the second time I'd calmed down a bit, so the machine seemed to work all right. The MRI scanner was quite a good machine. The noise it made was nothing like the noise I thought it was going to make. It was making the noise of a 130 beats per minute dance track, which was quite interesting. And in one of the later scans, it even added an offbeat snare drum. If you look on the screen at the moment, I'm test running a Stuart Models beam engine, which is a great machine and runs very well. You can actually see my face in the phone. I've only just noticed that. What a rank amateur when it comes to taking videos of beam engines running. After the blood pressure check, I was told to wait in the waiting room. And there I was with my Sainsbury's carrier bag full of everything required to sustain me through the ordeal. One of the items was a bottle of water. I thought this was a good idea to drink this in the hospital so that after the procedure I could check that I could still urinate. Also, I had a substantial bin liner to put on the seat of my first wife's car so that I didn't mess it up when I bled all over it. Also in the carrier bag was the obligatory pack of flushable wet wipes to wipe up any blood that may be running out of the bottom of my trousers as I got into the car. The time came for the biopsy, my name was called, and I was shown into a room very close to the waiting room. There were various very medical-looking things in this room, including an ultrasound machine. I was asked to undress and given a surgical gown, which to my surprise did not fit me across my broad shoulders. Then the nurse in charge said, "You've put it on back to front. We don't have any bigger ones that are one-size-fits-all arrangement, but they are supposed to be open at the back, not the front." Anyway, I laid on the thing that you lay on, pulled up my knees into like a fetal position, and the procedure began. The first thing was a local anaesthetic, which was no issue at all. I didn't feel anything. Then the biopsy probe went in there, and sometimes I felt like an electric shock feeling. That was maybe a little bit painful, but, I'm a big boy and I'm quite brave. Except when I have an anal probe in my rectum. But anyway, we won't go there. If I remember rightly, the urologist took 13 core samples of my prostate gland. And in about 20 minutes it was all finished. I stood up and the nurse handed me a pad. I don't mean a pad to write my memoirs, I mean a pad like a sanitary towel pad. I know that this video is a bit long-winded, but what I'm trying to do is reassure any men thinking about having a prostate biopsy, and it's nothing like you think it's going to be. I looked at this pad, and to be honest, I've never used a sanitary towel before, so I pulled off a piece of paper which revealed a sticky bit, and I stuck it to my backside. As I keep telling people, I'm a musician, not an engineer, and my logic says, stick the pad to your backside, then pull your underpants up. But really you're supposed to stick the pad to your underwear. I got that a bit wrong, and I only found out the problem when I pulled it off later, and it pulled off quite a lot of hair from a certain area of my posterior. At this stage I really was waiting for all the blood to gush out, but none came. And when I finally removed the pad later on in the day, there was about as much blood on the pad as there would be if I'd have cut myself shaving. That's if I shaved, but as you can see, if you look in the phone, I have a beard, so I never cut my face shaving. That was it. I got fully dressed, gave the gown back to the nurse, said thank you very much, and carrying my Sainsbury's carrier bag, I went to the toilet in the hospital, and to my surprise, there was no blood in the urine either, and I was a bit puzzled by this, thinking, well, that's a bit puzzling. To say my prostate's been stabbed about 13 times, surely there's going to be some blood from somewhere. I was feeling more confident all the time because I expected problems. On the leaflet it said, "You may get swelling and the prostate will close up and you will find it very difficult to pass water." So I walked back to the car, spread my bin liner on the seat just in case, and off we went, back home. Once there, I took it easy. I just laid on the settee and played Skyrim, a computer game that I really like. Later on in the day, when I went to the toilet, there was a tiny bit of blood in the urine, just as it started. Which may be nothing if you're a female, but it's not something you ever want to see if you're a male, and I still found this a bit scary. But the whole thing was still an anticlimax, and as the next few days went on, I did pass some blood, and on a couple of the days a bit more than others. Another thing that's worth noting, I was expecting to pass a lot of blood when I went to the toilet to do a number 2 the next morning. But no blood seemed to come from that area at all. So all the worrying that I did about my bathroom looking like something from the Texas Chainsaw Massacre was completely unfounded, and I felt a bit stupid really. That's why I made this video in the style that I made it in, my own style. I've tried to avoid showing parts of my anatomy, that is, other than the reflection of my face in the phone, because that's bad enough. I was told that I would receive a telephone call yesterday to give me my results, and indeed the phone rang, and I spoke to the consultant surgeon. All bleeding has ceased. And the surgeon started the conversation by telling me that it wasn't serious. They had found some cells that weren't quite right in the prostate, but they weren't in the lump at the front anyway, and recommended a blood test in 3 months to indicate where the PSA level was, and told me not to worry about it. And oddly enough, I wasn't that worried about the cancer, I was worried about the prostate biopsy. The prostate biopsy that I nearly cancelled. So that is about it. I had the biopsy, I now have a result, and it's an ongoing investigation. The last thing I have to say to you, if you've watched this video to the end, listen gentlemen, get a grip. If you have any problems with either your waterworks or even erectile dysfunction, it's not always what it may be, and even though Viagra or similar will solve the problem, there may be underlying health issues. If you get any problems whatsoever in that area, get some help from the medical profession. And if the information in this video saves just one life, then it's been worth making it. Stay safe, stay healthy, thanks for watching, and may your prostate always be healthy. Please take the time to visit my Mainstream Models website and click on the section of the website that says Video Playlists. And by doing that, you can find other videos that you may like to watch. And by using the playlists, you can actually watch the videos back to back.